Welcome to all of you joining us virtually for today's Bravo Dialogues on corporate partnerships from philanthropy to social impact investment in Latin America. Today, we're honored to be hosting an incredible panel of senior business leaders from across the region who will share their perspectives on Latin America's social impact investment landscape. Joining us, we welcome Thiago Fernandes, Head of Latin America Social and Environmental Group at Bank of America, William Davis, Managing Senior Vice President, Corporate Development and Strategic Initiatives at City National Bank of Florida, Marcelo Fumasoni, Head of Human Resources at Microsoft Latin America, Liana Sucar-Hamel, Head of Communications Latin America for Airbus, and our moderator, a good friend, Jorge Becerra, Emeritus Senior Partner and Senior Advisor at BCG. Today's speakers collectively represent the opportunities for collaboration that we have in the Americas and the positive impact that corporate partnerships and social impact strategies can have in the region's environment and communities. This conversation is part of our year-long Bravo Leadership Forums. These forums have become our signature engagement and dialogue platform for bringing together Latin America's business leaders to promote cross-industry collaboration on key issues impacting the region. At the Council of the Americas, we are proud to provide spaces for leaders to engage in forward-thinking and inspiring discussions on the most important issues driving growth and development in the region. Today's speakers represent the great knowledge and potential that the region holds, and we look forward to hearing their thoughts and perspectives. To conclude, I want to give a very special thank you to our sponsors and partners of our 2023 Bravo Series, Bank of America, the Jeffrey Group, the AES Corporation, Pfizer, Grupo Mariposa, Chubb Latin America, Fitch Ratings, MasterCard, Moody's Investor Services, and Salesforce, as well as our media partners, America's Quarterly, Bloomberg Linea, and CNN Español. With that, Jorge, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria Lourdes. Good morning, everybody. As it was said, we are excited and thankful to each of you, the panels and the organizations that they represent, because I think we try to carefully select the stories that are behind the work that they do and the passion that they have on the topic. Just to add a bit on the background of each of them, in the case of Liana, has been for many years on the industry side on corporate communications and employee engagement and community impact initiatives as an expression on how this sense of seeking social impact is part of the whole employee strategy and communications. In the case of Thiago, as you know, he leads the social environment practice for Bank of America in Latin America. But at the same time, he has a passion of being an entrepreneur and being on the ground to really see what are the needs and how to really find creative ways of solving them. In the case of Marcelo, he has an extensive career on the people strategy side, on the HR side, in many industries, from the pharma industry to McDonald's, working with them also, and now for many years at Microsoft, and always trying to find the innovative ways of really solving complex problems and finding also the engagement of the employees in moving forward this agenda. And in the case of Will, we are excited that CNB was also here represented today, and by Will, because he is a traditional, effective, successful commercial and corporate banker. And in the recent years, he moved to really develop corporate initiatives at City National Bank, and as part of that, many of the sustainability initiatives. And really seeing how every institution is trying to move the agenda of sustainability, ESG, and the name that we could assign to the topic into the business side. And really, the key for this to really happen is really that blend when the sustainability is really part of the business strategy, not something that goes purely on the side. So thank you, each of you. And I think as we have done in the past, the idea is not to do a lecture, is to tell and share real stories on this topic that it's really accelerating very rapidly. We are now sort of faced and swamped with all the changes that are happening. This is also happening on the sustainability due to the expectations of investors, of the markets, the employees, and the society at large. So I would like to start with Liana, because somebody would say, okay, we are coming from different parts of the world, me, Thiago, and some of the other panelists, and we are flying. And therefore, flying obviously has a direct impact on carbonization and decarbonization. And we are very sensitive now that the airlines are putting how much are you creating on this one. But Airbus has really had a trajectory of really committing to some of these initiatives. Maybe, Liana, you in the first part, you may want to briefly describe that evolution within the organization and where does it stand, Airbus and your initiatives today as a signal of the commitment with a systemic view on some of the issues around sustainability, in particular climate change.
So it's thank you very much, and apologies, my throat is recovering from a bit of a cold. It's been, I would say,
Tenemos up here, right?
thank you. It's been, I would say, Airbus is over 50 years old, and we have had a constant, say, ambition to innovate our products, whether it be our aircraft, our helicopter, our military aircraft, our satellite space products. And in terms of, I would say, in the last 20 years, I would say that we have had a significant vision to start to have a more eco-efficient approach to the design of our products. Starting from the design all the way to end of life, looking for opportunities on how to recycle products that are to ensure a more sustainable approach to how our customers are able to utilize our products. Particularly, we have in the last, I would say, 10 years, become extremely focused on decarbonization and looking for ways for start not just producing products that would allow us to provide our customers, our airline customers, a solution, a product that allows them to be eco-efficient today, but also planning toward the future. So to give you some examples, we are very focused on hydrogen right now, looking for opportunities to not just produce a hydrogen-powered aircraft, but also we are looking to build an ecosystem that would allow us to have hydrogen-powered aircraft, in the next 15, 20 years. And this is something that we are fully focused on and are looking for like many ways, particularly in Latin America, to bring in not just government, but industry and build a proper ecosystem that would allow us to be able to operate in that type of environment. So that's done through partnerships with multitude of, whether it be airports or it be a number of industry partners in order to bring that to fruition, bring the product to life. Just a couple of days ago, in fact, another area that we're very focused on is sustainable aviation fuel. And that in order to be able to decarbonize, that's another strategy that we have. And just a couple of days ago at FAMIX, which is one of our major air shows in Mexico, we just announced, in fact, the winners of the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Contest. And in this approach, we went to particularly Mexican research institutions, academic institutions, and sought submissions for proposals on ways to produce sustainable aviation fuel. So this is essentially trying to create fuel from natural resources profile. algae, et cetera. So there were some incredibly just innovative proposals that were brought to us by, the future brilliant innovators that are the students at universities and research institutions. So the future is quite encouraging in this space. And, we're trying very hard to set up the ecosystem. So when we are producing these aircraft, we have a space to operate in properly at scale.
Thank you. Despite of all the fears that we have on these issues, understanding there are specific initiatives and quite a bit of innovation, as you said, because there has been many ideas on hydrogen and some of the new fuels, but understanding how those really would become a reality, it's so encouraging, as you said. Let me move now to Thiago, that you combine, as I said, that passion and commitment to the topic from early days, but in probably the last 10 years, a bit more at Bank of America. Being such a large organization with so many stakeholders and country dimensions and businesses, maybe you could share a story on how you moved from that initial intent, maybe 10 years ago, through somehow maybe defining a strategy, and what were key elements of that strategy in terms of either the approach, the metrics, or the initiatives, and where you are today. And then in subsequent interventions, we'll talk more about the future and the today, but how that evolution was crafted over the last 10 years.
Sure. So I'll take a little bit time here to speak about our CSR strategy and how we developed the impact strategy that encompasses both key thematics in which we can add value and that represent our DNA as an institution, but also what society really needs in Latin America and how we structure that in a way that it's standing in a sustainable manner internally and that it has internal support so that we can reach the expected outcomes, right? So I started just to give it a little bit of context. I started at the bank in 2011 as a consultant, and then I was hired in Brazil only to assist in Brazilian matters only. And then I was hired in 2015 as a full-time employee to be head of LATAM for that time, what was called CSR, right? And as I started that, one of the things that I had been asked was to build a strategy to do that, right? So the strategy should be within the global framework, but respecting our DNA. One of the things that we designed together with a group of LOB leaders, which made up the CSR committee of that time, that defined the strategy. I was leading the strategy, of course, with some key stakeholders, but we ended up defining that. And Marcelo, who was sitting here, was part of that. We elaborated on how we could make a difference, how we could use our knowledge as a bank, as a financial institution, to leverage other institutions, mainly non-for-profits, capabilities eventually, and also what was within our responsibility as a financial institution. So we looked on the ground, we looked internally, and we defined three main pillars: financial education, impact entrepreneurship, and economic development projects, all of which follow a certain pattern, a certain flow, right? So you come from the micro to the macro, and all of them in which we could somehow try to assist also in adding value, not only in financial support, and all of which together would make a dramatic change on the ground in Latin America to Latin America society. We have a society which is well educated in financials, that knows how to build businesses, and has the macro support to enable the best possible context to make all of this grow. We would have a dramatic different Latin America than the one that we know nowadays. So, of course, this didn't happen from day to night. So we took like 6 to 9 months to think about all the possibilities, to think about the best fits, to get the buy-in of everyone who was involved. But we ended up defining this thematic. And then there is a process to ensure that the execution goes into the right direction. So we needed to create some principles and policies and evaluation processes to define what projects should come in and what projects should be left out. We also used a VC type of approach, and knowing that most of the projects that we would select, despite of their great potential, would not make it
Yeah.
In terms of big scale, right? Because it's difficult, right? There are many factors, many variables involved, and it's natural. But we wanted to make it right, at least in one or two, to have a wide scale solution for a problem, right? And get this problem solved. I mean, I think this is we were talking about that, right? And if Bank of America, if Airbus, if Microsoft, right, if Citi don't think that we can solve a specific problem, then who will? And I won't be able to do that in my personal life, right? I don't have the resources. We as corporates, we have resources. The thing is, we need to select the right problems. We need to have the right diagnostic. We need to find the right solution. We need to have the right tools to understand the diagnostic versus what good solution may fit that. And then you need to pursue that. And you need to be patient. And it's a long run, right? So since 2015, we elaborated on that. We set parameters to accept those projects. So this kept that culture of the director that knows someone and knows a project. I wanted to support this project. Is it a strategic fit? No. So I'm sorry, right? And this has been agreed. It's not me telling you.
Yeah.
I convinced, let's put it this way, the committee to agree to that. So it stopped being personal and it started being more institutional towards a specific strategy as businesses. I mean, it's as simple as business, right? But when we start talking about social, then people forget about everything they do in terms of strategies, exactly, and all the formalities and all the principles that they use to do business, right? So we elaborated on that, and we are still standing on the same strategy today after 8 years, and we have seen some amazing progress. We started in 2015 with about 70 to 80,000 people directly benefited in a meaningful way within a specific strategic measurement concept that we developed internally. And we are now hitting over 1.3 million within the same approach and within the same line of budget. So without an increase on that.
Thank you, Thiago. And I think some of the elements that you described are quite distinctive in the sense of really, despite of the broad intent of having the social impact being focused on specific initiatives where you think as an institution you could build some advantage to really, as you said, solve a problem that maybe nobody else might be in that privileged position to do it. And then use that sense of prioritization and clearly the venture capitalist mindset is very specific on that one, because it would assume that some of them might not be scalable with success, and therefore you want to prioritize the resources that you have in a way of trying to get the impact that is expected. So that's very distinctive. And maybe in the case of Marcelo, in your early years that were more on the pharma side, share with us your story in the sense that pharma are one of those industries that is so close to society at large and social needs like diseases. And Latin America has specific cases of those diseases, despite of what other diseases would be their impact in the world. How, in your experience, you managed to lead some of those initiatives with maybe similar expectations, saying we do have and need to have impact, and our industry has some special conditions to solve some of those problems?
Thank you, Jorge. I'm really glad to be here and learn from these stories, our stories and experiences, because residing for many years in the HR space, I came from a time or an era where somehow public affairs or somehow legal, public or HR were somehow tackling the CSR complexity around, hey, this government is asking for this kind of request, or what can we do if they're going to open operations in Ecuador, in Peru, or expand in Argentina? And we are confronting ourselves saying, okay, let's go to corporate. Okay, this is our main mantra. And I remember when there was a time that at Novartis we find globally that we would like to eradicate malaria. And it was a huge campaign. We have the product, we have the technology, the logistics. So we helped lots of NGOs on that, big, long time journey. But at the same time, it was very difficult for regions like Latin America to engage with malaria. So we tried to, recreate what will make sense, another tropical disease, neglected disease. And we tried to rechannel, most of our efforts to Chagas, for example. And so clinical studies, training, logistics, and education primarily was something that we find out that it could be a good use of connecting our capabilities in something that will make sense to a complete different region. And it was hard to combine those two worlds, right? Because we are not structured that way internally to provide that kind of support. We are experts in one field, but not in the other one. So it took, really time to convince ourselves that we were, capable to do that. And it was, as you mentioned, Thiago, a strategy that took us, almost a year to develop. And it was a good piece of engagement. We didn't consider that coming from the HR side as well, how powerful it was, right? So people really wanted to engage in the project when it was public internally, that we were going to, work on Chagas, primarily Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia. And it was a trigger that, drove at that time and a considerable amount of energy within the organization. And it was really an opportunity just to put talents. And I remember that we had a couple of conversations about who should be the right person to be part of those big mainstreams or work streams. And we end up saying, hey, we need the bright minds from the company, but we need the passion as well. People that would like to contribute, they will bring great ideas and part of that field. So in my experience, it's we find out that despite that you have a corporate model to follow, it's important to create adaptations that will represent the local needs in your region. And also, it's an incredible opportunity to bring another bridge in terms of having constructive relationships with governments and institutional educations or health organizations, because that's where we combine most of our powerful, resources and create something bigger and better, right? So
that's great. That's amazing. And finding that, let's say, DNA of the organization in the case of the pharma company with that intent of solving worldwide problems like malaria or Chagas in the case of Latin America, it's not only, I guess, applicable to large organizations like Novartis and Microsoft, but also to local organizations. So we were pleased that will join today because they are a large and a leading organizations in the local community, but not really of the scale of the Airbus, the Microsoft, the Bank of America, but still just to show how smaller organizations but are committed to their locations and their communities, could this theme be equally, let's say, treated, prioritized, and developed? So why don't you tell us about, in the case of CNB, how this mantra, as Marcelo said, has evolved, and how it is linked maybe to the values or tradition of the company?
Well, all right, thank you, and welcome everyone. In our business and in our company, which was started nearly 8 decades ago on Miami Beach, as an organization designed by its founders to serve the needs of a certain community, which at that time was underrepresented in its access to financial services. So 2 gentlemen founded a bank in a single location on Miami Beach to serve the needs of a Jewish community, which at that time was not granted access to the extent it deserved. And they built a company around entrepreneurs who had needs that weren't being served. Now, nearly 8 decades later, our client base is obviously as broad and as ranging as our community in Florida, but it has never changed our sense, and the employees who obviously weren't here 80 years ago, connection to community and the important and the vitality that's necessary to be supported in the business community and in the families that own those businesses and the employees. And so for us, this notion of ESG is not new at all. The title of it is, but the behaviors, I think, in the genetics in our business have allowed us to look at this opportunity, which is exactly as we see it, both as a way to continue to engage with our employees and to build next generation people with the understanding of what's important to them from an inclusion standpoint, from a diversity standpoint, but to continue to serve clients, both our traditional ones, which tend to be mid-sized and larger businesses, but increasingly the awareness that our communities are only as vital as the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so as Jorge mentioned, part of my role is to make what for us is a very clear mandate and connection to community and to support to all members of the community, things that we can actualize in our businesses. And a business person inside the bank. And our challenge today is to find ways to have the impact we want in our communities with the moderate constraints of our size. I should tell you that an awful lot of the good that we're doing comes from our history and the legacy of that, but very much due to the fact that we are blessed to have an owner like BCI, whom I know this community is very familiar with in Chile, as a guidepost for us to help us find the right direction long-term and strategically to build towards. And it is the coming together of that, and importantly, the connection we have with our business ecosystem here. Again, we grew up in South Florida, and our ties to not-for-profits, NGOs, and the entrepreneurship community helps us find ways to continue to push ourselves to be more relevant. Whether that's at the product level, or that's at the client base and subsegments of the client base in the economy in Florida that might still be underrepresented. Today, that is mostly actualized through our partnership with resident organizations who have expertise, who understand data, and then can help us point to and connect with those part of our community that need the most help. Today, that is found in our work in an organization we call Spark, which is effectively a business accelerator for minority women-owned businesses and Black-owned businesses. In many cases, 2 and 3 employee or maybe as large as 10 employee businesses, which need access to information, access to connecting points to help them grow revenue, professional services firms. Often it means things as simple as a laptop for them to connect to a broader customer base. And it always means they need access to people who can provide counsel, knowledge, and coaching. In addition to financial support, it's the support of our employees that are making the biggest difference there, both in mentorship and in helping promote what we know to be fine and proven entrepreneurial skills. And so our impact comes naturally to us, but for us, trying to wrap that holistically in our business, connect with the employees for whom that's important as well, and to have their time be committed to communities in these regards, and to work with partnerships and expertise that we simply don't have by our scale. The resources we will never have internally through our own development. But I think we're getting there, and I would encourage everybody who's here, if you are working in a business scale perhaps as ours, that there are things that you can do without grander resources that are fueled by your conviction. And if you're fortunate by your own genetics and corporate history, to be impactful in ways that push you beyond what you know. And for us internally, as I think Jorge knows, our challenges are really in balancing our ambitions to do many things and to make sure that we are focused enough that we're changing the lives of business owners and their families day by day and building a next generation of clients that will become our core clients, really, all the while making our community stronger and more resilient. And I don't want to pass this back without acknowledging that we're sitting in Miami, Florida, a wonderful place in the world, surrounded by water and often visited by very strong winds. And while we don't have solutions, we are engaging today, baselining our understanding of things like climate change and sea level rise, both of which are next door neighbors to us. And I think we're building now a process through the help of experts externally of understanding how best we can engage with the built environment here to make us a community that will be as thriving and much larger despite these natural occurrences in 100 years than it is today. I would invite this group, as well as we invite everybody we speak to contact us if you have innovative ideas or if you have specific needs that a bank of our size, organization, or our location can be impactful to. We learn by partnering far greater than we learn by looking at ourselves in conference rooms and making PowerPoints to decide how we're going to have impact. So hopefully that information will be available to everyone here, and we look forward to speaking.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we mentioned, and there are some common themes that are emerging from your stories. One is, I think, yes, this evolution, somehow the initial intent around corporate social responsibility, moving from the older philanthropy attitude into this sense of really being very focused and active on specific initiatives. But at the same time, there is the let's say, organizational evolution on how you make this work in terms of having one area that is committed and it's accountable to develop these initiatives, and how the line of businesses are reacting to that and are taking themselves accountability to make it work as part of their business strategy. And I guess at some point, some of these organizations define, okay, what our next chapter on this plan would be. So maybe, Liana, you could tell us about, at some point, I understand Airbus decided to craft this intent to a very specific other initiatives and really commit to a next chapter on the airline industry and the aircraft development. Maybe you could share those story with us.
Yeah. So our purpose at Airbus is quite simple, and this is very much something that I think it's become part of our DNA. It's pioneer sustainable aerospace for a safe and united world. So we talked earlier about decarbonization efforts. We talked earlier about looking toward the future and how to produce aircraft and other aerospace products that can allow us to operate in a lower emission environment.
You can say zero emission. Yeah.
Well, it's difficult to measure to zero emission. We do have a product that we are looking toward the future called the Zero E.
Wow.
But in any case, so our goal is obviously to decarbonize and to lower emission. So that journey that we're leading for clean aerospace is absolutely core to what we do at Airbus. That said, we are focused right now. I would say we've narrowed our focus to three things: respecting the planet, right, which we've talked about. We can do that in many ways. Carbonization certainly is one of them. Valuing people, and this is very, very key to our human rights efforts, which we work very closely with our supply chain, work very closely to ensure that there is human rights code of conduct, that our supply chain code of conduct includes human rights elements that we want to make sure that all of the partners and vendors that we work with abide by. Inclusion and diversity for us is absolutely critical. This is something that we live and breathe in Airbus through a variety of ways, particularly through very, very strong employee resource groups that allow employees to join a group that they feel passionate about, that with similar interests, and they cover everything from LGBTQ plus to gender to mental awareness, mental health awareness, environment, etc. And then finally, enabling prosperity. And this is where we find our community impact activities of today. But in a moment, this is also where our foundation, our Airbus Foundation activities live, which is mainly tied to our humanitarian efforts, how we could use our products and services in order to support a natural disaster, support a need, whether it be satellite imagery at a time of a hurricane or an earthquake, to be able to provide a government with important images on how they can support society, whether it be using our products such as military aircraft to bring in vaccines or to bring in humanitarian aid. But we also have youth initiatives where we are very, very focused on everything tied to youth development. So we have an incredible product called Discovery Space, which is something that we created at Airbus, and it really took off during the pandemic. This is it's go to YouTube and you check out Discovery Space. It is a channel that is basically a variety of animated short cartoons that teach children about everything tied to aerospace, future cities, the future of aviation, future of space. And it, as you can imagine, because it's online during the pandemic, it really took off. So those are just some of the areas that we have been focused on for the past few years. And in particular with community impact, coming back to your point about how we transitioned from I would say the traditional CSR, which, you know, I heard a lot of what you said. I could relate to it. It was always part of our communication strategy in Latin America was to have a CSR component. I think this was, as you mentioned, maybe personal passion that I kind of put into it. But it didn't take too long for that person, and I'm so happy to work for a company where I could manifest and deploy that personal passion into the projects that I cared about. But it didn't take too long for the company to take its own CSR efforts at a global level and have a collective approach, which we're now calling, and it's gone through so many names, right? CSR, responsibility and sustainability and environment. In fact, in about 2015, 2016, we established sustainability and environment as a proper function within the company. So we've been focused on this for some time. And since then, we now have launched our community impact policy last year, which has essentially allowed us to have a collective approach to pull together all of the incredible work that Airbus is doing around the world when it comes to supporting society and measuring it properly so that we could actually understand the impact that we're making. We can dial up, dial down as needed and ensure that it's tied to our three strategic themes, right? Which are protecting the planet, supporting vulnerable communities, and youth development. So in our region of Latin America, it's key for us to be able to partner with what we're calling signature partners now, to be able to deploy our community impact policy. And one of our partners is here today, Thiago, and we're extremely proud to be working with them in the region because they don't just obviously do incredible work by providing transitional and emergency housing to vulnerable communities, but they also allow us to have an employee engagement element, which we find absolutely critical. This is, as I said, part of our DNA in the company. Yeah. So employees need to feel that they are able to participate, right, and have a passion for the impact that they're making in the communities, right? We don't just want to make the impact within the communities where we operate, but we want to give employees also the chance to do so. So I would say our journey has been one that has, I think, it's brought us to where we are today, but I think we had to go through it in order to realize where were the areas that we really truly needed to focus on and where were the gaps that we really needed to fill. And I would say now, you know, we're at the point where we have tools where we can provide employees with the opportunity to put their time, their volunteer time or their money, so donations or pledges into action quickly. Like, you know, we have an online tool that is within Airbus that allows the employee to just go in and pledge their time and money. So that call to action is even there. So I'm very happy where we are today because it's really been a full circle journey.
That's amazing. And you convey an energy in terms of your passion when you're telling this story. I think that is one of the keys for success that I've seen in many organizations where you have a leader that is truly passionate and committed to the cause, and that shows. So thank you, Liana, for sharing those. In the case of Bank of America, when you were moving from that, let's say, initial, very, I wouldn't say rational and sound strategic design and prioritization and the approach and tools, what were the do's and don'ts that, Thiago, you found within the organization to really commit the line of businesses? Any tips or learnings that you could share that were useful to you to really move the needle? As you said, 1.3 million really beneficiaries, it's a big number. So how it happened in terms of aligning the business leaders?
Yeah, this requires a little bit of, I don't know, personal skill as well, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to try to just transfer what you know how to do more instinctively into a method, right? But basically what you need to do, what I did was I spoke to each and every one of those key people I needed on board separately, right? And I heard what they had, how they could bring their inputs. People need to feel, not for a management strategy, but really for a purpose strategy, right? They need to feel engaged. They need to be engaged. They need to be a part of that. Otherwise, they are not a part of that. And then you have the problems, right? So it's not for Thiago to manage to do what he wants. It's really for us to do what we want to do, right? So it's different. So you need to bring people on board. I think this is the first thing. So you need to have alignment. You need to repeat yourself as often as necessary so that people understand why this is the best way, if it is the best way. And if it's not the best way, that they have enough engagement to be able to change the direction of what we're thinking. That's a collective construction, right? So I think this was a key element. And for that to happen, ideally, you should have a previous trust from at least a couple of sponsors within that group of people, right, who trust you, because otherwise you need to prove yourself why you're trying to create a trust environment. It's difficult. So people need to look a little bit up to you in terms of what you're proposing so that they accept your technical leadership in that sense. This is very important. What I see a lot happening, and regardless of being more business oriented, as my colleagues here are presenting, Bank of America is also very business oriented. We have a 1.5 trillion commitment 2030 in sustainable businesses. So there's a lot of products that we have that touch sustainability and social and so on. And we as an institution, as a bank, are already in between government and societies and trying to make societies and economies thrive, right? So we have our role as a financial institution is already very social and environmental focused, right? But that apart, we really need to be experts when we're talking about impact, right? We shouldn't just pick someone who is a nice person, put this person there to do CSR, whatever. If there is such a person, if this person has capabilities, then this person needs to go in depth into understanding what impact is. So this person can lead. What I see a lot overall is people that are not really, they have the right intention, but they're not really capable, or they lack the main competencies to do that. Because changing something meaningfully requires really deep knowledge, right? It's not something you can make out of guessing, right? So one thing, exactly. So you need to go on the ground. You will never be able to change something you don't know. You haven't lived, you haven't experienced, right? We talk a lot, just as an example, we talk a lot dropouts at school. Oh, why do kids drop out at school? I always compare that, like, I'll bring a thematic here into the room. I'll tell you guys, you will study for 12 years how to plant potatoes in Mars. 2 principles that I will give you right from start. You will never be in Mars, and you'll never see this potato. I think it would be really stupid if we would go through the 12 years. Right? So this is how the kids feel. Because people developing the policy, I'm talking about general terms. I'm not picking one another, just general, right? They don't understand the context in which those kids live and what is necessary for their living. This is linguistics. There's science for that. People just ignore linguistics. They ignore anthropology, right? So they're like, why are they leaving school? I think it's because the math class is not nice enough, you know? Okay, because how to plant the potato in Mars class is not good enough. Let's bring in better experts on how to plant potato in Mars. It doesn't make any sense. So they leave because if they're going to accomplish 12 years and then not plant potato in Mars, they can just leave now and not plant potato in Mars, right? They don't know what to do with that. They haven't been there. So you need to motivate them. They need to show them the pathways. You need to tell them how this can be useful for their contextual life, not for ours. If they wouldn't have the same context as ours, they probably wouldn't be there, right? So this type of thing requires you to understand realities, understand people, right? And then identify a problem, and then look for experts who know how to solve that, and stick with those experts until they got it solved. Otherwise, there's no need. I mean, every 3 years we change projects. Why? We don't do that at the stock exchange. You don't keep changing every 3 years the types of investments you have unless you're looking forward and you see there is not enough value into the future, right? So if the value is there, you need to continue, and it will take 5 to 10 years to settle a problem, maybe more, depending on the problem you choose.
Amazing and very real stories. I took the example of planting the potatoes in Mars, and I guess, Marcelo, you might have also found those situations in your career. And I guess going back also mentioning the point that Thiago made on the level of expertise, many organizations have defined that they need to really either upskill or train their people on some of these topics through either universities or some initiatives. So any stories that you could have on the training side or the development side, and how to make those initiatives very real for either employees of organizations that you have been associated with. Yeah.
Super. No, I was looking at the example because it's fantastic. One of the things that we are struggling today, being part of, in the tech world, is we're trying to identify a competency called futures literacy, right? The capacity that allows people to better understand the role that the future has in everything that we see and do today, right? So it's anticipating the future and bring the future to today. That's where AI, ChatGPT, and all the amazing solutions that are coming from all the tech world are popping up, right? That intersection between science and technology is creating that edge. So I think that we're going to see the tornado. We need a little bit of extra help. So, but it's about to happen. I see that there is a huge opportunity, and we try to capitalize that at Microsoft, or particularly during pandemic and post-pandemic, is that everything that we're talking today, how our employees feel engaged, how they identify that they have a purpose, how they feel, and particularly the word feel, it's very important right now. It's something that we are focusing more on the feeling of the employees at the workplace, being hybrid or not. How they feel prepared, how they feel that they acquire value doing or learning, particularly learning. And companies that out again in technology, and every company is a technology firm these days, right? We need to acquire and digitalize ourselves more and more. So the competencies about how we can live better, understand better the digital world, what are those kind of skills that we need. So we did a great program on upskilling. We put that on most of them on free access on our LinkedIn platforms, and we find out that we were just doing open source, right? Putting our contents there so people can pick up, choose and pick. Okay, this content, developers, projects, whatever. And we find out there was a huge demand, right? So we say, hey, we need to structure this better. And because we are in a lab environment and we would like to help each other, and I think that that's, inner source that we all have. We end up, for example, one lovely idea that we had, having a conversation with my former colleagues from McDonald's, and say, hey, what are you guys doing in Latin America in the university? Say, well, we have content, we are growing, we have been developing this, Marcelo's in left, we did this and that. Oh my goodness, we have a lot of contents there. Will you be able to explore that particularly the digital ones that will be helpful for your employees and families, because families have access as well to most of the content that they prepare. So in 3 months from Argentina, we start to scale up all the HR teams that they have in Latin America with our own content. And it was fantastic because from the phone call to the execution, it just happened 3 months, right? It was not rocket science. We were a little bit, hey, we are going to build something very hierarchical, probably a little bit parochial. No, let's be sharp. Let's move the content. Let's put 2 to 3 people from our teams, have 2 to 3 calls, 3 months execution. And it was a very powerful experience for us to gain more confidence within the company that these things could happen, more often. And sometimes we prevent ourselves to say, no, these large corporations will be very difficult. There are a lot of barriers. So again, I think that there is a huge opportunity in front of us to really explore more and more. And something that I like, Thiago, that you say is, and I see that happening today. I see that the pendulum is moving from, that we started creating a sort of, moving for compliance, right? Because some government is asking something because, hey, we are going to a country, we need to pay something in terms of, contribution. And now it's much more about conviction, right? It's within the business. We are not going to start a plan if we don't have a CSR part, if we don't have a sustainability part, that it's part of the proposition. And I've seen that, evolution. I'm surprised myself that this is the trend that it's, becoming a reality for the next years to come.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Also, you mentioned that those contents and platforms will be available not only for the employees, but for the extended family. So you increase and scale up your reach, as I mentioned.
Yeah, we touched almost 25,000 people after 3 months of planning. And again, Latin American talent, new capabilities. We are all benefit from having a much more broader talent base, right? So that is how we see the process going forward.
Well, in the case of City National Bank, obviously you did anticipate already about some of those initiatives that are part of your DNA on local community support of female entrepreneurs and the Afro-American community and other segmented communities. But maybe society would be expecting also what are the attitude of banks on their traditional core business, that is the lending. And with many of these emerging technologies, what has been a bit of the approach for CNB in saying how to include this sustainability dimension through the lending policies and strategy, and in which initiatives, and what do you think the banking industry stands in terms of favoring either technologies that will really contribute positively to a better world?
Jorge, I think, and thank you. I think the easier part for us of our desire to have greater impact is the people component. The more difficult part for us, because, and when Thiago spoke, it really hit me correctly, the knowledge required for businesses to truly understand how to impact environmental aspects of their client base, of their community, in our case, is not very high. And in our case, what is required and continues to be necessary for us is to engage with business leaders in ways that get them committed. And we do that more and more these days through education. We don't have it internally. For them to feel empowered, for their teams to feel empowered, to bring banking products, lending products to the market, we need to continue to build our own knowledge of how that can work. And emerging technologies are important, but there's some very legacy technologies that are good as well. One of the ways that is working for us, not journey completed, but journey in progress, is to make sure our business leaders understand that by doing good, we will do well. That our customers want this type of finance. They want to understand the technologies because many of those customers themselves don't understand how they need to face the future or how to face the current environment in ways that are both good for their business and good for the environment. And so we are believing now that we can be both an educator and a provider of finance, but we're not doing it by our own internal knowledge because we really don't have it. We are getting there through partnerships selectively with industry and where the innovation is really occurring and trying to build meaningful relationships with them. We want to build our own conviction and knowledge so that we can bring with confidence to our clients ideas. Not that they're going to pay us for the ideas, they're going to pay us for the finance, but if we can help them create and adapt and face a brighter future with our finance and with partnerships, we believe that's the way that we can be most important to them today. Some examples of that would be the continued hope we have that there's a role for us to play in financing the electrification of transportation, electric cars, charging stations, transport vehicles and charging stations. We've made connections and spent a lot of time with industry who are actually building the stations. And at the moment are less certain that might be the place for us to go. And so it is an iterative practice for us to investigate, to learn, to hypothesize, to test, and move forward where we find reasonable solutions and near-term impact, or to change directions. Another example is how we are facing, as I mentioned earlier, the built environment and the want and need to support those developers and investors who are building structure that is sustainable into the future, given our climatic realities. And internally, zero practice, almost zero awareness of how that should work. And so it is through experts, non-bank providers, and technology firms that we're starting to build our own internal enthusiasm around this. And our enthusiasm at the business level is generally going to be driven by helping our business people be more successful, helping them reach more and better clients, helping their clients be more profitable. And so it is that process that we're starting now to build some momentum towards really engaging with the same purpose we have in our normal business, but also in ways that are important for the future.
That's great.
For us to support the people we've always supported in ways that yet they don't know they need to be different.
Given that now we're entering the final 5 minutes, and before I'm signaled with a red signal that we have only 5 minutes, let's go into the easiest part of the panel. That will give you 1 minute to each of you to really summarize, because there were so many common themes that were somehow shared, but from your individual view, what is coming next, either in terms of something that would be more technical or more personal in the journey that you are leading, and that could be a takeaway for the audience, based on the story that you told us.
Yeah, I think this is the most exciting part, right? Because we're able to shape it right from now. For us at Airbus, I would say we're focused on a few things. Well, one of them in particular is workforce development, creating the pipeline of the employees that we want to be able to hire. We're ramping up our industrial ramp up right now in the United States, but all over the world, obviously to meet the demand of our aircraft orders is very high. And we have to hire a lot of employees fast, and they have to have the right skills. For example, I was just last night in facilities in Mobile, Alabama, and one of the things we were doing was actually doing what we call U-Talks. Like we have a leadership university for our employees, and in that U-Talk we were talking about driving cultural transformation and industrial collaboration, and what do leaders need to do to inspire their teams to be able to manage the stress of an industrial ramp up, of the pressure of having to deliver quickly, and connecting and collaborating, and just some very fundamental leadership elements, right, that are important for Airbus from a retention standpoint. Obviously, we want to keep that institutional knowledge that is so critical to our day-to-day. But then recruitment is absolutely something that we are 100% focused on right now, and that workforce development is key to that. So that it starts from a very early stage. It starts, like I said, with Discovery Space, which is for young kids. My 10-year-old daughter loves this. To all the way to having middle and high school programs that teach children and high school students and teachers about the importance of team building, of thinking about being creative and working together, innovating, making mistakes. It's perfectly okay to make a mistake and then just recovering from that mistake quickly and moving on to the next thing. So I'd say workforce development is a big one. And I'd say another one is
one more.
Yes, one more. The last one.
Yeah.
I'd say is empowering the employee. Right now, that like I mentioned earlier about this tool that we have, Positive Impact, to be able to put our time, our money, pledge our time and our money. That's just one example where we are creating awareness about community impact, but then giving the employee the opportunity to then take that passion to action and be able to put their time, their money into what they feel they're passionate about. So give them the awareness, we give them the knowledge, we give them the tool, and then they choose from the millions of organizations that are fully vetted and they're able to support. And I feel that, with COVID, we learned so much about how to narrow our focus and how to do things. And I really appreciate what you said about being able to be focused on something, being able to really accomplish it, that compliance to conviction. I mean, we're so capable. And I think in COVID, we learned how to really narrow our focus because we had to survive. Our businesses had to survive very complicated times. And I really feel that we are at a good place to be able to do that. So for the future, I think if we focus on these things,
very powerful.
I think it will be.
Thank you, Liana. Now, Thiago, you need to catch up So because you have 2 minutes among the two of you, you have minus 1 minute. So
30 seconds less from each of us.
because if not, we'll be panicking.
Sure,
with
sure.
other time.
No, that's, based on what I was speaking, I see two big potential trends for industries at large, not only the financial industry. First of all, impact measurement. Not the technicalities about impact measurement, but really understanding the outcomes of your initiatives. Being able to measure it so you can manage it. And once you are able to manage it, it will hit the incentives. Right? So why am I saying that? If you look into sustainable finance, for instance, right? If I pick an example, random example of an oil company buying a wind farm, right? It is a sustainable deal. I think no one would argue it's not a sustainable deal because it's better to buy a wind farm than to buy another oil company, right? But what's the actual outcome in terms of emissions? Zero. Wind farm still exists, the oil company still exists. There's no additionality in terms of less emissions into the atmosphere. So this is very easy to measure when we are talking about emissions because that's an exact, that's a science, right? It's exact science, it's math, right? But when you're talking about outcomes to people, health outcomes, right? How are you measuring that? And if we want to achieve the goals, if the United Nations want to get to the goals that they're setting, you need to be able to measure what you're doing. Otherwise, we'll get there reaching some aspects of the goals without the necessary outcomes of those aspects, right? And then we are in a problematic situation as a world community. As soon as we get part of this right, I would understand incentives would be based on those type of outcomes. And then we have a way of moving forward in a much more consistent way than what we have been doing so far.
Right. Let's see. Marcelo, you're minus 3 minutes.
-3. Okay, I will be very short and sweet. I guess that one of the trends that we've seen is that we will need to have a very good open umbrella of, flexible menu of opportunities for people to engage with, corporate social responsibility, with their own desires. I was one of those that thought that, hey, I will do something with my life after retirement. And I didn't get that, during my operational life, I could start doing something. And I remember what you mentioned about Techo. I started, 5 years ago with my family, friends. We built 50 plus houses in this past time. And I wouldn't imagine that I would be able to do that myself on my own, with my family, my relatives, apart from what I had in my mind that the company probably will do and I will engage. So again, I'm sharing this two sides of the story because if you're in an organization where you're responsible for CSR or have a role on the sustainability, be mindful that most of the employees would love to have flexibility to choose where to contribute more and more. And again, on the personal side, don't wait for that time to happen. Start today because I believe that there is a huge opportunity connecting more and more among us and create that impact.
Thank you, Marcelo. Willie.
1 minute?
Yeah.
I think as we think about the future, and I personally think about the future, our experience is working with entrepreneurs, which is the core of what we do, but more and more lately, younger entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs from the non-traditional communities. I'm convinced that we're going to be better because of the commitment and the contribution of younger people. And I'm one of the older people in our firm. And I'm closer to retirement than I am the beginning of my career. And I believe in the way we engage internally around things of responsibility. It is always the attitude and the actions of the youngest members of our team that make things happen the fastest, particularly when we talk about new and different. And so I'm convinced, based on our experience, that the future is brighter because we're giving a greater voice to the younger members of our team. And entrepreneurs at younger and younger ages are determined to solve problems that they didn't create. And I'm convinced now that we're going to be better for that. And the more we can do to support those communities and those younger people inside of our firm and outside, the quicker we're going to get there.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, each of you. I need to admit, I feel very excited about the stories and the times ahead, given the level of commitment and passion that you show individually and in your organization. We want to thank you for sharing these stories And we do hope that the others that will be seeing this recording may get even more inspired about what could be done and needs to be done. So thank you so much.